They said that, so you did Malcolm Gladwell in here?
Yeah, he was
Is
sitting
that
right there.
awesome?
It was great.
Was he just in town for the tour?
I don't know. They had this date set up, that date set up, man, like seriously, it was like July.
Wow.
And they're like, yeah, we'll hold September 27 or whatever it was. And I thought, all right, that's kind of far out.
Yeah.
So they must have planned his whole book tour really early,
Yeah, I bet.
which
Yeah, he's just in a different like stratosphere. I
and
imagine.
as far as
Just everything. I
Yeah.
mean, he's like, yeah, he's the OG of the space.
he kind of is, yeah.
Yeah.
And I look at some of his stuff and I'm like, wow, this project got a lot of attention. Like, you go to the airport and they'll have like books for you to buy on your flight, and it's like, whatever, half the people we know are on there. He just has a whole cardboard shelf and it's
Yeah.
only that book.
Yeah, and that's not free.
No, for sure not.
Yeah.
It's like probably like 50 grand, or I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
grand.
sure. And like when people go, oh, it's paid. Well, it's paid, but you also have to sell.
Yeah.
So like you pay, but like I've done them before, and you pay, and they're like, we don't want your money anymore. Like you have to sell.
Really?
It's like you pay, but you have to have a certain sell-through rate.
Wow.
So it's like, let's say they're like, okay, we'll do it. It costs $20,000, but you have to sell like 60% of the copies that we order. Because like someone else will take that spot.
Right.
So like they also want to make money from selling books.
Oh, right, because they're profiting on the top of that. Yeah,
It's
that
not
makes
like
sense.
it's not like that was empty. So it's like if Malcolm Gladwell's publisher doesn't buy it, James Patterson's publisher buys it.
Yeah.
Or whomever. Or Michael Lewis's publisher buys it or whatever.
It must be weird to be like, I guess those guys can write anything and it's like immediate, like multi-million-dollar marketing campaign.
Probably. Yeah. And I mean, they've also been doing it for like 30 years.
Yeah, I
Or,
mean, it's
like
it's kind of only a matter of time as long as you don't blow it.
well, I don't know about that, but I do. It is. I went running with this like really great running coach this morning. Are we starting or? I don't know.
Well, we can edit out like
Okay.
nonsensical.
But
stuff.
yeah, I just didn't know how good how granular my answer should be. But we were running this morning. It's like you don't. The problem is you don't compare people that started like in like races, like you're all in different heats.
Yeah.
Like you're comparing people who like either started way before you or way after you. Like
Well, this is relevant.
okay,
Like let's
Okay.
let's include this because I do this to myself all the freaking time.
yeah,
I don't compare myself to somebody who started when I do. I compare myself either to somebody who started 20 years before me, and I'm like, when do I become Charlie Rose without hopefully some inappropriate allegations of, or whatever,
Sure.
any kind of issues. I don't even want to go down that road. I should have just let it go. Or I compare myself to like somebody who started a year ago but has somehow managed to get the spotlight for 2 seconds,
Right.
and I go, oh my God, my life is over. This person got featured on something, and now
Right.
why even try?
Or you go like, oh man, like this person's getting this thing, like, and you're like, but I've also gotten that thing. Why can't they also get it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you not only like want things that you don't have or you're jealous of, but you're also just like territorial about.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's not like a zero-sum game. Like I have to think about this with authors all the time. Like so-and-so's book blowing up and selling millions of copies. And not only doesn't hurt me, but a bunch of those people are probably weren't readers before, and now maybe they are readers, and now like
Sure. Like, wow, I bought this book and it was great. Other people who've also bought that recommend this Ryan Holiday book. Maybe I should get that. Nobody's like, oh, I already have a book, so I don't need any more.
yes.
I'm all set
And
on books.
if they do, they're probably not like they're not a so they're a great customer.
Right. Yeah, the person who listens or like only watches one YouTube video a month, probably not exactly your
I've
your
listened to
toughest fan.
a podcast.
Yeah.
Like that's not who you're after.
No.
Yeah.
No, people who listen. Well, as long as they only listen to mine, fine. That's
Right.
that's the thing. I'll go like, oh, what other shows do you listen to? And if they have like 10, I'm like, screw this person. You're not a real fan. You're spreading your time out among other people who also create good work.
Right.
How dare you? It makes no sense. It's like a very illogical, internet-based.
Yeah. Right. It's like, look, if you're Coke and they're Pepsi, that makes sense. Although even those, they're totally interchangeable and nobody cares. But yeah, you end up being, you forget that like actually you're really in a race against people not listening to podcasts at all.
Yeah.
Or not buying books at all. And so like it's not like, oh, they bought James Clear's book, so they're not going to buy mine. That's not what's happening at all.
They're going to buy all of them, and then they're not going to read any of them.
Right.
And you're still going to get a royalty. Right. What's that stat, though? Like 83% of books that get purchased don't get read or something like that? Or it's like
sure
a
that's
huge
true.
majority.
Well, but yeah, sometimes people go, it must be so weird being famous. And it's like, okay, there's famous, and then there's like being an author.
Yeah.
like even if you sold lots of books, like people don't know what your name is. But like, even if you sold lots of books, how many people have bothered to read them?
Yeah.
How many people have looked at the name on the cover? How many people have flipped all the way to the back and looked at the photo? It's like 5%. Like it is not a problem.
At your level, it's got to be name recognition, right? Where people go, Ryan Holiday, like, oh, I think I've read one of your books. Like that must happen at some point.
It does. Yeah, every once in a while. I mean, certainly when you start, the worst part is they go like, oh, what do you do? And you go like, I'm an author. And then they go, would I have read any of your books? And it's like,
No.
no.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't have unless you have.
And now you're humiliated. It's like, because like the joke is like, oh, tell me one thing that you've done in your life that I've heard of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good point.
Right? Like if I heard any of the insurance policies that you sold, it's like the answer is no. But like if you have a public facing thing, it feels
that's true. People think if you're in any sort of public facing field, you're automatically measured by your notoriety.
Yes, which is your by your name recognition amongst total strangers. Yeah. Not like how successful are you in your niche.
Yeah, good point. I didn't even think about that. Because of course, like, would you have read any of the, I don't know, do you read books that are for smart people? Like, it's not my fault if you don't. It's not my fault. I'm not less because you haven't seen my book.
I mean, the other day, someone recommended this book to me, and I never heard of it, and I pulled it up on Amazon. It had 16,000 reviews.
Oh, it's
and you're like, that's like 10 million copies? That's like I'd never even heard of this person. And so, like, it's not that he's not successful, it's that I'm not clued in.
Yeah.
Like, and so yeah, you end up using these like metrics that maybe would make sense when there used to be like 10 people making a living writing books. Mm-hmm. But it's like, that's not how it is anymore.
It's like TV. Everyone watched Larry King and people wrote, oh, during Larry King Live, this news event happened. Now no one's like, during the time that Ryan Holiday and Jordan Harbinger did a Facebook Live, this thing happened. Like no one would realistically ever care about that. Yeah, I think you've done a lot of things that a lot of people are maybe envious of or jealous of or want to do or say they want to do but never actually wanted to do. One of which is figure out maybe what you wanted to do for a living early.
I guess, yeah. No, that is an interesting thing, like, to go to the point about, like, comparing yourself against other people. People are like, I'm 28, I want to be an author, or, like, my book came out, didn't do well. And it's like, but when I was 28, I had 9 years of experience. Mm-hmm. Like, and so you got to, like, you have to compare yourself against people who are in your peer group and your age bracket for, like, the amount of years you've been doing it or reps you have. Because that's the only measurement that really counts. And so, yeah, I was, the fact that I figured out that I kind of wanted to be a writer, and then I started researching for a writer in, like, before I turned 20-ish, it wasn't like a little advantage. It was like an exponentially large advantage. And like every year those returns are compounding. It's like you start saving for retirement early, you get to that magical point where the grass starts to go like that.
Yeah.
So it is important, but it's not the age that you started at that's important. It's the time that's elapsed since that point. Right? Like it has no magical part that I was 20 when I started. It's the 8 years, or now it's 12 years. Like, that's the point. So you could start when you're 30. You'll just hit that inflection point in your 40s.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't really thinking about radio or interviewing or anything. And then I started the show when I was, I think, 26. But then I didn't really think, like, I'm interviewing people. I was just, like, I was screwing around.
Sure.
And then I interviewed Robert Greene, like, 7 years in, and he's like, hey, you're really good at interviewing. And I was like, well, if he thinks I'm good at it, then maybe I should take it more seriously.
Yeah.
Then I started to do that, and it still took me like 4 years after that to be like, oh, this is how professionals prepare for an interview. They actually read the book.
I think there is a moment where so it's like, let's say the 10,000 hour theory. And I know there's, like,
back and forth on that.
Back and forth. But the general idea that it takes a lot of hours to become really good at something, I think that's pretty indisputable.
Yeah.
I think there's, like for me, I put up my first blog like the day I graduated from high school. So let's say it's like 2005. Let's say I really didn't get super serious about it until 2006. And then my first book deal happened. And I started writing my first book in like 2011.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like 6 years, 6-ish years.
Which is actually a really long time when you're in your 20s.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Now I'm in my late 30s, so I'm like, oh, I've known Jen I've known her for 7 years. Wow, it's a pretty long time. But when you're in your 20s, you haven't even been a functional adult for more than 5 or 6 years.
Well, kids do that to you too, because you're like my son is now 3, and so now I think about like what my other son will be like in 3 years. Like just the idea that I can think in a 3-year chunk was not a chunk of time I could comprehend before. But so I did those 6 years. I didn't really know I was doing 6 years. In retrospect, it's obvious I was paying 6 years of dues. But I was also like, I just thought I was writing. Like I was writing, I was having some success, not success. I was seeing the audience tick up every day. So let's say there's like those 6 years. Then the book came out and you start getting sort of rewards and recognition. Like at some point, like I don't know the exact conversation I had with someone, but it was like, at some point I decided I was consciously going to be putting in those hours. Like I'm really, like in a way a comedian thinks about getting stage time.
Yes.
Like that's less clear for other professions, but there was at some point where I was just like, I'm going to get really good at this. And so it's really from 2012 to 2019, those 7 years, I probably, let's say it was another 6 years, I think I got double or triple the amount of time and the amount of ROI from the time, because I was really consciously deciding to get better. And not only writing my own books, but also ghostwriting. I was like, ghostwriting because one, it would give me some financial freedom to write my own things, but also like, I just wanted like to get really good at the craft. And so now there's really nothing you could put in front of me that there's things that would be hard and challenging, but there's nothing I think you could put in front of me writing wise that I'd be like, I'm not sure I could do that. There's things that I wouldn't want to do and I wouldn't do, but like I think I could write just about anything.
That's a big statement, right? Because to say, that'd be like me saying I could interview anyone.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, I don't know.
But I bet you could.
I would have to, it's sort of terrifying to think about doing that, but yeah, I could.
Well, so I bet when you first started, if I was like, okay, you can introduce the president, and let's not say the current president, but like an actual presidential person, like let's say like Obama, let's say you could introduce, you'd probably be like, I could do that. And of course you would do it.
I would figure it out, yeah.
But you would be bad at it. Like you would listen to the tape, you'd be like, I can't believe I blew this opportunity. And then there's probably a period where you would have like maybe thought you weren't ready for, like now you would do it and you would be successful at it. Is sort of what I mean.
Yeah. It's funny to look at do you ever look at old work that you've done and go, oh man, what the hell?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So I've had the weird privilege. So I wrote my first book in 2011 on my own. I didn't sell it. I just wrote it and then I sold it. And then so I worked with an editor to reshape. I worked with the editor who bought it to reshape it. It came out in 2012. Then in 2013, I did an updated, revised paperback edition, which I changed some stuff. And then in 2016, after the collapse of Gawker and after the Trump election, I did a third edition of the book. So I've had this weird, unique experience of basically rewriting that book 4 times. And each time is a horrendous experience because it's like mortifyingly embarrassing. You're like, I published this. Like,
I worry about that.
Yeah. It's what I learned from the experience is like, it's not that it's bad, because it's not. And it's not that I'm wrong, because I'm usually not. There's definitely errors in it. But what is the most off-putting and I find the least excusable is the certainty with which I was saying whatever I was saying.
Sure.
So it was like, I might have been right, but I had not done the work to be right, you know?
Or I have no basis for this other than confidence.
Yes. Or ego, really.
Or ego,
right?
yeah.
Or I was right, but like I was my logic was shoddy, or the example I was using was a weak one. Do you know what? Like it was like it's good, but I'm missing, and most of all, I'm missing a lot of nuance and empathy and even-handedness. And so that's like one of the things I try to work on now is I just try to be way less certain of everything.
That makes sense. That's great. I've gotten more for an interview. I've gotten more compassionate. Whereas before,
Yeah.
I'd be like, I got to be challenging because I got to show that I have to like demonstrate authority.
Yeah.
Now I don't have to do that because I realize it's my show. I kind of already have some authority.
Yeah, and you're like, why would I do gotchas?
Yeah, it's stupid.
Or why do I need to push back? Or I think to me, and I talk about this a little bit in the new book, I feel like what that is that's what confidence actually looks like. The insecurity is the need to overreach, to overstate, to like assert yourself. And the confidence is like people who will get it, and like I don't need to like. There's like an element of trying too hard.
Sure.
That you don't need to do once you're confident.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it's a non-neediness that actually works really well, but it's really hard to fake.
I think readers, listeners, viewers, or whatever, they can like taste it.
Yeah, I think so too. I get a lot of email from older listeners that are like, "Hey, you went too hard on this person," or "You need to do more about that." And they're usually right. And the reason they're right is because they're parents and they have kids that are like my age or slightly younger. And they're like, I recognize this.
Yeah.
This is me 30 years ago, or this is my kid who's 17. Like, you're better than that. Stop doing that.
I get that. I'll get emails and like the person will just be like totally wrong about something. They'll be like, oh, why'd you say this? Or you shouldn't have said this. And like what I'm feeling, I'm more confident when I can just like not respond. Like, cool. Like I could just feel like, okay, but there's the younger part of me has to like make sure to let this person know that they're wrong.
Yeah, sure.
And I think the less you have of that, the better decisions you make and the less trouble you get yourself into.
Yeah, I mean, how do we get there though? That's the question, right? Because for me, it's just been getting older and getting tired of doing that, I think. Like playing it out in my head and going, so I got that person and then they came back and they were mad and then I was like, oh, you're just mad because I'm right and you know it. And then they now hate me, so I got nothing from that interaction. Like you have to do that over and over.
You send the email and then they're never like, yes, sir.
You're right. You're right. I'm wrong. You're right. I like you more now. I don't need
to get into this giant tar pit.
Ugh. Yeah. I would look at. I was looking. The reason I brought this up, I was looking at some of my old prep. You've been on the show, I don't know, like 5 or 6 times in the past 10 years, and I was like, oh, I'll see if there was anything that I didn't ask last time that we just didn't have time for that's still interesting. And I was just like, who made this? They're fired. Whoever made this show.
Your notes?
My notes. I was like, these are terrible. Like, what was I thinking? They're organized so poorly. My questions that I wrote underneath phrases from the book are just dumb. Like, they're just not good.
Interesting.
And I look at people who release like best of shows. You ever see a podcast and it's like replay best of?
Yeah.
That will I don't have that best of. That's not old stuff. That stuff is not good. In my opinion, or it's not as good. It's certainly not best of.
Yeah. Wow. So you're that hard on yourself?
I think so.
You couldn't see a best of?
I can, and I'm looking. Here's what's funny. On Saturday, I have like a 4-hour session planned where I'm going to re-listen to a bunch of old episodes.
Yeah.
And some of them might get re-aired, like things I did with like Shaquille O'Neal and things like that. And what I'm worried about is going, oh man, none of these are good enough. But I have to be kind of careful because I'll say that about something I did a month ago.
Right.
Just because, I don't know. I'm hard on myself, I think.
No, I've had to do that with my talks. Like for the first like 4 or 5 years that I gave talks, I didn't want them filmed. And I would if they were filmed, I would never look at them. Mm-hmm. Probably because I saw one, it was really bad.
Oh, yeah.
And so I told myself if I just like pretend that it doesn't exist, I'll be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now I'm actually much more okay with it. I almost want it to be filmed. I'm comfortable seeing myself on camera, and I want to actively think about how I can get better at it. Mm-hmm. Whereas before I wasn't getting better because I refused to think about that I was not good, And I saw this interesting. Pete Carroll is the coach of the Seahawks. He was talking about, he was like, coaches love to submit like love to break down film of players, and he's like, do coaches ever watch film of themselves? And so he did that one year. He like showed all the coaches, like he did like a clip of each of the coaches throughout the year, and he was it totally changed how they coach. So like I'm screaming at this person, like this is if a like I'm not being who I want to be or what I was thought I was being in that moment. But it's always easier to stick your head in the sand about it.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of that.
I guess part of it is like part of it comes from a good place. Like, do you really want to be a person who's like wants to like listen to hours and hours of your self talk? Like, it'd be weird if you were really into it.
That's true.
But you have to be able to do it because you want to get better.
That's true. I hear about guys like Dave Letterman. They say, where was this? Doesn't matter, I guess. Something about him going home every night, watching tape of the show, shredding himself, beating himself up, being absolutely horrible to himself. And wasn't that show on like 5 nights a week?
Yeah.
So, I mean, doing that to yourself...
That can't be healthy.
It can't be healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's both. Yeah. I think it's a balance. Like, you can't just assume that you're just like constantly spitting fire, you know?
Yeah.
But you also can't be like treating yourself like a piece of shit.
It's tough because you see successful people treating themselves really poorly all the time.
Yeah.
And it's easy to go, that's obviously why they're so good at what they do.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about this a little bit in the book. Like, you look at someone like Michael Jordan, he was clearly a collector of slights and grudges and resentment and like totally manufactured feuds as a way to fuel himself. And I just think like we kind of know where that comes from. Is there's this moment when he's like he says he's cut from his high school basketball team, but really he just didn't make the varsity basketball team as a freshman or a sophomore, which is like not supposed to happen.
Right.
It's like I didn't get kicked out of Harvard. I didn't get accepted to Harvard. Right. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, that's not how it works. You can't just make that up. But he comes back the next year and he makes the team, and obviously he leaves this guy in the dust. But it's like, he tells himself it's because he stewed on it and he shoved in the coaches. He also grew like 7 inches in the off season. Like, he might have taken that's a sample size of 1, and he used it to direct the whole course of his life. And it might have nothing to do with do you know what I mean? Like we can take like these singular interactions and be like, that's like, it's like somebody cheats on you and you're like, women lie.
Right.
You know? And it's like, you have that woman lied.
To you about something, not lied about everything the whole time.
Meanwhile, you were also lying, and also she actually tried to tell you the truth and you refused to hear her. You know, so anyways, we take these like singular things and then we extrapolate out these like
massive stories.
Yeah, and so I think you causation and correlation are definitely not the same thing. So like the fact that there's, great people who break themselves down on film and are horrible. Jimi Hendrix was also a drug addict, and so was Kurt Cobain. Was that healthy or deeply unhealthy?
Right, good point. Yeah, I think it is hard to separate high performers from some of their negative habits.
Yeah.
And that sounds really obvious because we have, I'm sure, mutual friends where we go, wow, he would be so much better if he didn't like shit talk everyone or like drink too much.
Yes.
But we don't, people from an external perspective who don't know them that well might be like, oh, you know why Jordan's so good at what he does is because he like blows rails of cocaine every night. So of course he reads 17 books a week. Like he has all this time. He doesn't sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we just, so in medicine, there's this idea of comorbidity. Like there's things that like depression and addiction, they don't really cause each other, but they are comorbid. They come along with each other, just like obesity and depression. And like there's all these things that are comorbid traits. And so I think drive or ambition or talent is often comorbid with a lot of negative things. So like, for instance, the desire to always focus on the next thing, that's like something I have. Like I'm not like, I got the sales numbers this morning for the new book, but I'm also I'm not like, this is wonderful, let's have a nice dinner.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I'm like, well, I'm not only not reflecting, I'm actually busy negotiating like the next one, right? And so in some respects, it's obviously served me very well. That's why I'm always stacking projects. I know I have a lot of dead time, but that also prevents me from enjoying the thing. And so like for champions, I'm not calling myself one. I'm just like in sports, that desire to never be happy with what you did, even if you broke a world record or won the Super Bowl. Obviously you can see why that like makes them a champion, but it also means that they never feel like a champion.
Yeah, I find this too, and again, we're far from Kobe Bryant, and you know, I don't have any rings to show for this, but yeah, we got named like best of 2018 by Apple, and people were sending me messages, and I remember being like, I wish all these texts would stop breaking my focus because I'm working on something, and friends of mine were like, you must feel great, and I actually felt worse by them saying that because I was like, well, I don't really. I mean, it's good, but I don't feel good. And it also makes me question, where am I going to be in like 30 or 40 years? Am I ever going to sit down and like enjoy the fact that I've achieved stuff? Or is it just going to constantly be this way? It's a little scary, actually.
Yeah, no, it is scary. It's scary. It's certainly a first world problem.
Yeah, of course.
But it's like there's just not a lot. There's people just don't really talk about how to cope with that or deal with it. And I think one of the downsides of not talking about it is not only do we not solve that problem, but like people become convinced. You go, oh, it's the problem wasn't that I can't enjoy being named the best. It's that I was not the most downloaded.
Mm-hmm.
You go like, I'll feel better if I get that.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Or you go, oh, like this was nice, but what, like, oh, this Super Bowl was nice, but like, I really want to be in the club of people who have won back-to-back Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Or like Kevin Durant. It's like you won all these rings with the Warriors, but he's like, now I got to win one for myself. You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what it's going to feel like when he gets it? If he does, it's going to feel exactly the same.
Yeah, sure.
And it's going to feel not good because that's the curse of being great.
Yeah.
And so it's I guess what I'm talking about in the book and what I'm working on myself is like, is it, and maybe it's not possible, but like, I think that it is like, can you get to a place where you do really great work and you perform at an elite level, but you do it from a good place rather, like in Buddhism, they say like craving is the opposite of stillness. Like anything that's coming from craving is bad.
Well,
it's not that sex is bad. It's that like the craving is bad.
Right,
like the need. And the Stoics talk about this too. They say like a wise man can use many things, but he needs none of them. It's the need, the place of need, that's the delusion, because you're saying if I get this, if this, then that. And so I just like, can I write a great book, and can I continue to write great books, and can I have a career where I, perform at an elite level, where I'm doing it not to prove anyone wrong, not because I'll be happy if I get it, not because I want to have this amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
or I need this amount of Instagram followers, like, can I just actually be in it and do it and come from there, not from the just that darker place.
Mm-hmm. How do you make that shift? Because it's not like I don't know that if this happens, I'm saying if this then that. Hey, look, if I get 100,000 more listeners over the course of the year, it's going to be great. Yeah. Our revenue's going to go like this. I'm doing if this then that. But I've already played this game before. I've been doing this for 13 years. Like every year it's a different goal, and every year I feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I'm happy looking back, but I'm not like satisfied ever. So is there a way where you then go, you know what, this is unhealthy. Clearly banging my head against the wall and doing this isn't really, the craving is still there. That part's still unhealthy, or is this just another if this then that? Well, if I can get this craving to stop, then I'll be healthy and I'll be able to enjoy myself. It's the exact same thing. Inception.
No, I was talking to Pete Holmes about this. He was talking about how like he and his wife like sometimes fantasize like, oh, what if we could like live? It was like, what if we could have a farm? And I was like, I have a farm. Yeah. It's not that great.
Like, it sounds awesome. You have a lake.
Right, it's great, but it's not like we got it. I thought it was gonna be my dream house, and then the next thing I'm like, whoa, I don't really like the floors, and like I really dislike how it's laid out. Like
Dang.
that, you're always gonna do that. So and so he was like, what we've slowly realized is like this is the farm. That's what he's like. The house where we currently live. That's whatever the fantasy is, right? And that's actually a mantra I have, and I try to say to myself all the time, like this is enough, or like this is it. There's not some other thing. Like there's just this. So I think presence is kind of the antidote to what we're talking about, because like it when you're thinking like, oh, I just need to get 100,000 listeners, or if I can just get the revenues up to the 7 figures,
Yeah.
or if I could just secure, like for me, like I tend to think I have this sort of insecurity, so it's like contracts. Like if I could just get this locked up, then I can count on it.
Yeah.
Or if I can just have this amount of passive income from this, like then I won't feel like I have any financial needs. And it's like that's not how that works. But
Yeah.
just going like this is it, this is enough. That's like kind of a mantra I try to repeat to myself. And the reason I think it works is that doing a great interview with Malcolm Gladwell, or trying to write a book, or trying to give a talk in front of this audience is hard enough.
Yeah.
How arrogant is it to think you can do that while also using 5% or 10% or 50% of your mind over here to think about how you're going to get more subscribers? Do you know what, like,
Yeah, it's a waste.
well, it's not just a waste. It's just like you're cheating the performance.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you're not giving 100% to the thing. So like in a way, it almost makes because we all do it. It makes what we managed to accomplish more impressive. We're like, man, how'd you manage to hit all these home runs while also designing, fantasizing about the next 3 years of your career.
Right.
Like how many could you have hit 2 more home runs with the cumulative amount of mental energy that you wasted thinking of far ahead.
Right. Yeah. That distracted feeling is so toxic. Whenever it happens, when it happens during an interview, or whether I'm being interviewed or talking to somebody else like you, it's like I almost like taste motor oil when I'm like, oh
Really?
God, yeah. It's not literally, but I just feel the pull. The pull is a great word, because I'm over here and I have to like beat that worry out. It's like getting an email from your lawyer right before you have to give a talk, and you're just like, crap.
I shouldn't have checked this.
I should have checked this.
Yeah, and we do that mentally, and like so I went through this a little bit yesterday. So my thing is I don't check my phone in the morning. Like I don't use it as an alarm clock. Don't sleep within the room, and I try not to check my phone. When I'm at home, it's like a minimum of an hour. Sometimes, like I'm on the road, like it's like I got to know if I have to. They change the call time from this time to that. But like I don't check my phone in the morning. So I had to use my phone as an alarm clock because I'm staying in a hotel room.
Yeah.
Tip: first thing you should do when you get into a hotel room, unplug the alarm clock. You have no idea what horrible time some idiot sent it to.
Yeah.
And
4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I've had things where it's like I had 4 hours of sleep, and I could get 4 hours of sleep, and it was actually all ruined because the person before me set the alarm clock. But the point is, I had to use my phone as the alarm clock, and so I went to go turn it off, and I saw a bunch of texts from my agent about the sales numbers, and I could tell they were good. From the glimpse, I could tell they were good. And I could tell that I wanted to check them, but I knew that's not the best way to spend the morning. Like that would derail the morning.
For sure.
Because then I got to call these people, I got to see what they are. I got to have a conversation about it. I was like, my plan before I saw it was to wake up, go for a swim, write in my journal, and then get a little bit of writing done before I have to go do this thing.
Yeah.
And why am I going to let good news or bad news get in the way of that? And so you've got to be like that email from your lawyer before you go on stage is like, to me, is a great analogy, because it's like we could be in the right headspace, but then we let other things jump in, either external news, internal news, or whatever, but it's just not where you should be. And so like I actually said, I was like, okay, I'm not going to check this. I now am going to work to do this swim. not
Not think about
actively
it.
not think. Every
Yeah.
time it comes up, I'm going to push it away, and I'm going to try to get back to whatever this experience would have been without peak. It's like, there's a surprise party coming, and you're just going to try to forget that right? And like, it was work, but you have to be able to push those thoughts away, because like, there are going to be other times with other more serious things with higher stakes, that if you haven't worked out that muscle, you're just going to be like, I just blew the opportunity of a lifetime because I saw a very unpleasant tweet from a total stranger, because I was checking my phone when I shouldn't be checking my phone.
I know.
And blah, 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 blah.
I see that, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people who I find are overcome with anxiety. Not everyone, of course, but a lot of these people, they have too much input and they just can't deal with it all.
Yeah.
And they need to not be on their phone, or they need to not be checking it, because everything causes like a fight or flight reaction
Yeah.
in their life.
Well, look, the news, for instance, is not, there's no money in making you feel like everything's okay in the world.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So like, I think people just consume way too much news about everything. Like the financial news, political news, celebrity like, why are you consuming this information?
Got to be up to date.
Right. It's like,
For
what?
what purpose? So that
Yeah.
you can like impress
not
people at a cocktail party that you're not invited to? Anyway?
Exactly. And no one ever goes, wow, Jordan, you're so up to date.
No.
Like,
No.
you never feel like you don't feel like you get there either.
No.
And you don't do anything with this information. And most of the time, the consuming of the information actually makes you deeply unhappy or distracted. So people think, like, I follow the news to be informed. And it's like, meanwhile, how many books could you have read about, like, history or the human experience or wisdom or spirituality or whatever that would have actually made you informed in some sort of lasting way? Or just you talk to these people and you're like, okay, so you know about the ins and outs of this investigation, but you actually have no idea how our system of government works.
Right.
And you tell yourself you're informed, but how could you're not informed, you just know some trivia. And then meanwhile, there's this other person who hasn't turned on the news for 10 years, and they could just tell you exactly how this event is going to go.
Yeah.
Because they know how history works.
I assume maybe you're referring to this impeachment investigation that's going on. Somebody asked
Just
me
any
the other day-
investigation, but yeah.
Somebody asked me the other day, "Oh yeah, so things are heating up or whatever," and I was like, "Yeah, I don't really know." And they're like, "Oh, you're not following this?" And I said, and I was so proud of myself for saying this. I've never uttered this. I said, "I'm gonna wait for like 5 years, and then there'll be a book about it. I'll just read that because there will be, and I'll get a very well-rounded, complete 360 of the whole thing, and I'll know it. I don't need to know it now."
Well, think of the expression that you just said. I'm not following it. Why do we need to follow it?
Yeah.
We should go where it ends.
Right.
Right? And look, there are things where, like, if people are like, I'm watching the debate because I need to decide who I'm going to vote for.
There's that.
Okay, so you have said that consuming this information is going to have an impact on a decision you're going to make. But most of the people who watch the debates know who they're going to vote for. And they're just watching crappy sports.
Yeah.
They're watching the worst sport ever.
Moderated.
They're watching moderated debates.
Yeah, it's moderated by Anderson Cooper.
Yeah.
I want Anderson Cooper to moderate no sports. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's just like a really boring, slow-paced game of nothing.
Well, and even think about it this way. Debates used to be, this is the debate, and different cable stations are all recording it at the same time, right? Like, so it was an event being covered on television. Now it is an event being put on by television, right? CNN is inventing this debate. This debate was not going to happen without CNN. It's not like the Lincoln Douglas debates where like a bunch of people were watching these two, figures in Illinois debate each other, right? It's like, this is a manufactured, this is a press conference, right? Which is done exclusively for the purpose of getting media attention.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. You're right. It's not necessarily a government function now. This is CNBC, MSNBC or CNN or Fox News going,
man, we can get millions of people to tune into an event that we don't have to pay anyone to appear on.
Right. Yeah, good point. There's no salaries for the athletes or
Yeah.
anything. The advertisers involved are still going to pay a huge Super Bowl level premium, probably, if they even have that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
You figured out what you wanted to do really early in life. You kind of mentioned that you'd thought about being a writer at age 19. A lot of people will write in and go, how do I know what I want to do? And
Sure.
I'm like, well, crap. I'm the last person to ask. I'm still
Yeah.
figuring it out. I'm 39 years old.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's it's like, how did you find the person that you were going to marry? That's like, I don't know, you know,
Twitter.
it just happened.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
fell into it, and then I didn't say no to the experience. So I don't have like a great answer, although I think Robert Greene's book Mastery is probably the book I recommend most to people. And one of the things he talks about is he's like, you got to think back to your childhood, to that thing before money and pressure and like what your teacher said, before any of that. Like, what were you sort of like purely attracted to that got you going? You know, like what was that thing? And probably inside, like, I kind of think like, what would you do for free?
Yeah.
What do you stare out of car windows and think about? You know, like, I'm not saying that tells you the job, but it should give you a sense of like the ballpark of where this career thing is. So
That's
it's like,
true.
I read lots of books. I really admire writers. Okay, probably something in publishing. You know, maybe, and then it's like, where do your skills overlap with this? It's like you're obsessed with baseball. You could be a GM. You could work in the marketing department. You could be a professional baseball player. You could be an agent. You know, you could be the guy that, you know, takes care of the field. Like, there's a lot of different things, but your sort of subconscious told you that like baseball was it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. Looking back at my own childhood, I tried to build an FM transmitter when I was like 9
Yeah.
because I wanted to talk on the radio. And it turns out it's illegal to attach a huge antenna to those things, pesky FCC licenses. But I forgot about that for 20 years or something. And
Yeah.
then not quite 20 years, but yeah, close to it.
Well, and for me with writing, I think the other thing is people go like, I love video games. I should be a professional video game player. You know, like
Yeah.
it's not, don't just think of the most
The
glamorous
obvious one.
thing. I love podcasts. I should have my own podcast. It's like, where does that overlap with your skill set, right? And your background, and what does the market need? Like for me, it was like, I don't think I was like, I want to be a writer. I started, I love books. I love reading. I want to be around authors. And my first entry point into that was marketing for authors, particularly internet marketing and online sort of social media stuff with which at the time was a very uncompetitive space and a very poorly understood space. And it was only in working with these people and meeting them and really figuring out how the process worked that it was like, oh, I think I could actually do this. Like they have different skills. They're not like, it's not like, you know, maybe you go around basketball players and you're like, wow, these are like just totally different human specimens than me. I didn't have that feeling being around Robert Greene or the other authors that I worked for. I just got this sense that they had dedicated themselves to a different part of the craft, and maybe I could do that.
Yeah, you could have easily been an editor at a publisher, reading other people's work and crossing things out dramatically, which is what I kind of imagine they do.
Yeah. That's mostly in Microsoft Word. So there's not a lot of crossing out.
Maybe
a
no
lot
crossing
of
out.
A lot of those comment bubbles.
Oh yeah. Oh geez. Yeah, maybe it doesn't sound as fun at that point.
No, but you
is.
find out you like go. It's like you were in the studio. You're like, I love music. I love recording things. Go get a job sweeping the floors in a studio. You know, and then figure like because early on you don't even. I was thinking about this with sports because my books have become popular in sports. Like I've met all these people, these sort of team psychologists or mental skills coaches for the teams. And I'm like, I really wish I knew this was a job. Maybe that's actually what I would have been really good
Yeah.
at. Like I'm writing is clearly what it is for me, but I was like, if you had told me at 19 that like there was a guy who worked for the Sacramento Kings who just helped them be better thinking about basketball, I'd be like, how do I go to school for that?
Right.
I didn't know that was a thing, but if my parents had helped me get a job as a ball boy
Yeah.
at the, like, I would have been like, I would have needed to take a step towards the industry, and then I would have found out that profession
I
existed.
feel like you are in school for that. You're gonna write all these, and then someone's gonna be like, "Hey, come give a talk," and you'll be like, "How about I give a talk every
all the
week?"
time. Yeah.
Every week for a
Well,
nice fat salary.
Dan Coyle. He wrote
like the Talent
and,
Code.
Yeah, and Talent is Overrated. I think
Mm-hmm.
he works for the Indians now.
Nice. Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
That for me, that's like an alien world, this whole sports thing. But I get it. I would have been really well served being like the coffee kid at a radio station.
Well, podcasting didn't exist
It didn't
at
exist.
first.
No.
But it was you following the space enough and messing around enough and you had the, like, and that's why, in David Epstein's book about range, like, that's why you got to have all these different interests because they converge together around something. And oftentimes that's where new professions are created as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. Whenever people ask me how to figure out what to do with their life, the answer is always make a list of skills that you would like to learn, go learn those, and then figure out where you can apply them in different businesses. Doesn't even have to be the same thing.
Yes.
If you want to learn Forex trading, you can go ahead and do that, but it doesn't mean you're going to be a Forex trader. You might be like at some desk working with an executive who happens to touch that business.
Yeah.
So, and that stuff tends to come together quite nicely. Like, this podcast never started as me interviewing people, as me talking about like how pathetic my dating life was literally 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm out of content. Maybe I'll do an interview with somebody else. And then I was like, that was the most fun episode I've ever done.
Sure.
So this slow evolution is the only way to do it. I think now people look at these things that they say online or that they see online or that they read in books and they go, oh, well, this person this fell into their lap or fell out of the sky. And it's also reinforced negatively by marketers who go, oh, my origin story? Crap, I need to come up with a good one. Here's this really smooth curve from me having like an epiphany and then meeting the right people and then getting really lucky, and then here we are. And it's like, whoa, none of that happened. You're in the Army for 10 years. You didn't even talk about that. Or
yeah, and Peter Thiel talks about how we have this inclination towards competition.
Mm-hmm.
So like we go like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. A lot of people are doing podcasts. I will do podcasts because we think the fact that lots of people are doing it makes it safe, right? When really the real gains and the real success in life usually comes from breaking some kind of new ground. So look, I'm an author. Lots of people are authors, and it's like one of the older professions, I would say. But I write a different kind of book for a different kind of audience. I went where there's no one, like, when I was like, I wanted to write a book about Stoicism, the publisher's not like, oh yes, that is a very established,
it's a hot topic right now.
Right.
No.
And if they had, that might have been better for me in the short term, but much worse for me in the long term. So you want to think the key is like, where do these diverse interests overlap and add up to something that doesn't exist? Not like, oh, like people go, I'm smart and I like arguing. I should be a lawyer. That's like the worst one.
Oh, that is that's a hot topic because that's what everyone will tell you. And these people who are not lawyers, they don't even know any lawyers. They're like, oh, and that's how I ended up in law school. Aunts being like, oh, you should be a lawyer. You can get anything you want, kind of job you want with a law degree, and clearly you like to argue or be right, so you should do this. And it's I think it was like Tucker Max wrote this whole post where it's like, this is why all of these things are wrong.
Yeah.
And that post is, I end up sharing it a lot when people go, should I go to law school? I'm like, you should read this. Because the answer is probably not when your mom says go to law school based on all the stuff I've seen on NCIS Miami or whatever, or Law and Order. These are not good representatives of what you're going to be doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, of course.
It's not going to be like JAG, where you're flying in a jet and armed and chasing people down in Manhattan. You're going to be in a cubicle. A lot of the time, if you're lucky. You might not even have your own cubicle. How it's true though, right?
Sorry for triggering you.
Yeah, no, I got that went off on a tangent there. It's true though. I think a lot of people, they come up with an idea of what something must be like in their head, and it's so unrealistic. We just assume that that's at least representative a little bit of reality, and it's not even close a lot of the time.
Well, one of the things I talk about in the book is like, are you actually taking time to like stop and think about these things like that? So people are like, I'm going to be a lawyer. And it's like, how long have you thought about this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're saying I want to be a lawyer from the fact that your mom said you were good at arguing, and then like this guy down the hall from you is also applying to law school.
You're
Like,
right. That's pretty much it.
yeah, you're not going like you have to. Epictetus, one of the Stoics, he talks about, he's like, you got to take these impressions or these inclinations, and you got to like stop and put them to the test. Or like the other way is like stop, get out your glasses, put them on, and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Don't just look at the vague shapes and go like, I think I know what this is. Or like, yeah, I'll go that. Like, really stop and think about it. Like, not like take the evening, but like think about it for like a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who do you, like, do you know any lawyers, or like, do you know people that have done this? Like, what would happen if you actually were successful in this thing? What kind, like, I talk about this with people who are like, I want to do X, or I go like, but what do you want your life to look like?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And that was like what I had sort of realized, like, I really didn't like having a job where people could tell me what to do. So it's like, oh, so if I become more successful when I was the director of marketing at American Apparel, it's like, okay, so what do you do next? Like, I'm probably not going to become the CEO of this company because it's, run the way that it's run.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll go get a job at, like, I'll make a lateral move or a slightly higher move. I'll get the same position at a bigger, better company. And then it was like, wait, I'll actually be less happy because as chaotic as this company is, it does allow me to, it feels less like a job than a normal place. And it's like, success would be me actually moving further away from what I want my life to be. And so people, but when someone says, hey, I'll pay you $100,000 a year to do something that's the opposite of how you want your life to be, all you're thinking about is the $100,000.
Yeah.
You're not thinking, well, how much of that $100,000 am I going to have to spend to not feel like I hate my life?
Right. All of it. More than all of it.
Yeah, yeah. Or it's like, hey, I know you really love where you live. I know you have your kids are in great schools, and you have this great routine, blah 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 blah. But like, I'll pay you 20% more than you're currently making, and now you have to live in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
Not to hate on Buffalo, New York.
But you got to take your kids out of school.
Yeah, you have to
move your family.
Yeah, you have to do all this stuff, and your quality of life will be lower. And what are you doing with said money?
Yeah, retiring early, maybe buying another vacation so that your family doesn't hate living
in Buffalo, or whatever. Like, so I think saying no to money is like extraordinarily difficult.
It is.
And I have a lot of trouble doing it, and I don't do it enough. But just really, like, I had this experience where I got called back into American Apparel, and I was a consultant in the turnaround, and I sort of just detangled myself from it. I got free. And I remember this is when we bought our farm, and we were there, and I spent all morning writing, and I got this unsolicited email from a very big tech company that was like, hey, we need like sort of a CMO consultant to come in for like 4 months. It was going to pay a lot of money. There was like some stock, options attached to it. Be a cool challenge. And I remember I took the call and I negotiated some of the deal, and then I was like, but wait, I have to move to New York and I have to show up at a job every day. And I just worked really hard not to have a job.
Yeah.
Why would I say yes to this?
Because money. Yeah.
Because money.
Because money.
And like I wrote a piece about this for the Times, but I got, a pretty decent offer for it to be a pretty high ranking, figure in the Trump administration for one of the cabinet.
You did?
Yeah. This is like in 2016.
It's ironic.
And yeah, it was very strange. Clearly, they had not. I'm not sure it would have come all the way to pass because, like, I don't think I'd been vetted yet. And I think they would have realized like where I stood. But the point was, like, even there, I was like, I remember asking guys like, what do you do with like as an author? Or I was like, do I have to live in D.C.? He was like, yes. And I was like, what do you get paid? And he was like, not that much.
Jack squat.
Yeah. And then I was like, and what about like all the other like things that I have, like books and my investments, and he's like, all those have to go in like a blind trust, and you can't touch them. And then so it was like boom, 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 and then he was like, so are you interested? And I was like, yes, like because it was like in every in every way, it was the opposite of what I wanted. But we don't. It's really hard to say no to things.
It is.
And it's we don't take the time to think about them. So thankfully, I took the time to think about it. And when I laid it all out and when I talked it, like, this is why I think being in relationships is so important. If I was single, I probably would have jumped off that cliff, right? Sure. You're not able to think long term enough.
Sam was probably like, I don't want to move to DC. They have winter there.
Yeah.
That end of story.
She's like, or she's more like, this contradicts all the things that you like, right? And it's like, and you're, but
how cool would it be? Secret Service will drive us around.
Yeah, but you don't understand. It's also a huge pay cut, but also I'm ideologically opposed to everything they stand for.
And I can't do any business or anything.
Yeah.
And I can't work on any other projects like the ones I love.
But it's like, people are, what are you doing next? What about this? It's really hard to be like, this is my thing. This is what I'm doing. And to have the patience and the discipline to actually weigh the opportunities or the options against whatever that rubric is. And people just don't do that. And that's why they plunge ahead into stuff that makes them miserable or ruins everything they have.
It's true. And the most important time to make those decisions is usually when you feel like you don't have time to make those decisions. So when I was a lawyer, we had this economic downturn of 2008, and everyone went, oh my God, we have to find new jobs. And even I did that, and I even interviewed at some other places, and then I was like, wait, I'm working so hard to get another job that I don't even want. But all my colleagues were like, dude, you're not going to have a paycheck pretty soon. You have law school loans. You've got to repay that. What are you going to do? You're just going to... And I'm like, literally anything else? I will do anything else. Maybe I should go to the police academy. And they're like, you're crazy. They all scrambled and found new jobs. And now, of course, they're like, oh, man, this
right,
they
doubled down.
They doubled down.
No, people, that's the other thing. A lot of time, so this idea of like, look, I'm going to really stop and think about this. It's not just about making you more conservative. It's not like you only say no to things. It also helps you plunge ahead on things that other people are afraid of. So like when I dropped out of college, I was terrified of it, right? Like I did not, there's that like hell yes, hell no.
Yeah.
Like all the big moves in my life have failed that test. And I was really scared about it. And so I ended up deciding to do it. And I remember I went in and I was like, I'm ready to drop out. And they're like, that's not how this works. Like, it's much more gradual than that. Like, just take a semester off. Anyways, because I'd done that, because I had some experience taking a leap like that, when I decided I was going to like walk away from like a very good, lucrative corporate track to be a writer, I was able to go like, oh, I can always just go back. Like that was the interesting. I thought I was dropping out of college, and they're like, you can always come back. And I remember someone told me, they're like, when I was in college, I got sick, and I missed a year of college. And he was like, do you know how many people have ever asked what happened?
Yeah, zero.
Yeah, they're like, why did you go to college this year and then graduate 5 years later? Like, it was like literally never come up. He's like, I don't even think about it.
Yeah, I had mono. Oh, okay, next.
Right.
Hired.
And so the idea that we look at these things, we're super intimidated by them because they seem scary because they're unknown. And then you're like, you're suddenly like, I'm gonna live under a bridge somewhere, or I could get murdered, or and it's like actually nothing. This changes nothing. Like it's not scary at all once you break it down. So at the core of Stoicism, and I in the story I tell the book, like the beginning of Mr. Rogers, which you're almost gonna have to start watching.
Oh, I watched that documentary 2 days ago.
So
such a coincidence.
You'll start watching the show now that you have a kid, but like. The beginning of the show, it's a flashing yellow light, which is like, slow down, like look carefully, right? And we have to be able to do that in our lives, particularly when stuff is coming like a mile in a minute. Like just because someone sent a tweet to you doesn't mean you have to respond with the first thing that comes into your head. You could just ignore it.
Yeah, probably shouldn't do it at all.
Or you could wait 24 hours, like you don't... This stuff feels like it's real time, but 20 years ago, they would have written it to you in a letter,
Yeah, opened up by your secretary who then throws it away. Yeah,
exactly.
or it just gets lost. Mr. Rogers is an interesting case study. Why did I watch that recently? Is it in the book?
It's in the book, yeah.
Oh, that must be why I watched it, because I don't remember what jogged that. He's amazing.
I haven't seen the documentary.
Oh, man.
Because sometimes you kind of get this like professional jealousy about things. So like I started writing this book in 2016, 2017, like before the Mr. Rogers resurgence.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the only books about him were these like 2 obscure self-published books by like friends of his. And there was not a lot of stuff out there. And so I sort of fell in love with it, and I was writing all about it. And then it was like a Tom Cruise movie or a Tom Hanks movie.
Oh,
and
talk about casting
that would be
poorly.
good. That would be good.
Oh, God.
It's an action film.
Yeah,
Actually.
yeah. Mr. Right, it's the one that follows his story in that chain letter that everyone got that said he's a Navy SEAL.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
starring Tom Cruise.
But no, then there's a movie, and then there's a documentary. I was like, you know what? Like, I want to preserve like whatever the headspace I have about this thing is. But like, I think he's like one of the greatest people of the 20th century.
Definitely agree. Yeah, we don't really have sainthood anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe we will in a few hundred years.
But he would be a good saint.
He would.
And he was a minister.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. He was.
Yeah.
I wonder what he has kids. I'm so desperate to know like what he was like when he was super pissed off.
They talk about that in either the documentary or in the books.
Must be in a book because I don't think.
Yeah, like he was like kind of mischievous. Like he would like. He would like when he would want to say something inappropriate, he'd like do it in one of the voices.
He
of the
did it
puppets.
in King Friday's voice.
Yeah. I bet he was a totally normal human being.
Yeah.
I mean, he would swim every morning.
I saw that.
He was just like a normal guy, but just also an incredible person at the same time.
Somebody who has that level of, it's got to be so hard to just talk to kids and be measured. Not that he only talked to kids, but his whole life was geared towards talking to small children. I don't know if I could do that.
But there are these anecdotes about him just like meeting people and just like having whatever that like sort of angel like energy is, and he could just like go to the core of who they were. So I actually think it's more like he had some energy that was so special that it would work on anyone, and that it would work on kids is a sign of just how powerful it was.
You know
Does
what?
that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
It's like
Basically,
Cesar Millan or something.
Yeah, he's like the kind of guy that birds probably land on his shoulder, and it just so happens to mesh well with children, so he decided to speak to children.
Because it's so rare.
He had a talk show for adults, and I'm dying to get my hands on it. I know. I cannot find it. It's not anywhere easily accessible. I'm sure it's on reel-to-reel tape somewhere in the basement of like CBS or whatever.
There's this story.
PBS.
There's this story where he gets like got like a lifetime Emmy or something, and he goes up and he gives a speech, and he's like, I have about 30 seconds to talk, but instead of talking, I'm just gonna look at my watch here, and I'm gonna give you 20 seconds to think about someone who meant something to you.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. Who comes up with that? That's incredible.
Yeah.
But I think about this, like the energy that it takes to interact with kids or animals. Like Cesar Millan obviously is someone who's operating on like a totally different level than the rest of us. But like my son goes to this daycare, and these 2 Cuban ladies put like 15 toddlers down for a nap simultaneously every day. Like I can't even put, we have trouble putting one toddler to nap. You know, he's like running around. I don't want a nap. I hate naps. Like you got to strap him in the car and drive around. Like imagine doing 15 kids who are not your kids.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Simultaneously, like like if you want to talk about stillness, like think of the energy and the calmness and the discipline that you have to do something like that. And I think those people have something that, you know, we should all study very seriously.
How do we start? How do you start studying habits of people like that? What do you look for?
Well, I mean, habits is a great place to start.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, what does Mr. Rogers' day looks like?
Yeah, swimming.
Yeah, he gets up early, he like he has some quiet meditative practice, he swims, he eats the same thing. Just even that he's doing the same thing. It's like, oh, he's simplifying, right? So he's not picking up energy from like, where do I have lunch? You know, what time does the show start? You know, should I work out today? Yes or no?
Yeah.
You know,
he
like
only has 3 sweaters.
Yeah.
We've seen them all.
Exactly. Or it just even like, hey, this is the intro to the show. I mean, it's his show. He could have changed it up every time, but he's like, no, like routine, you know. And I think what do something enough time, like, okay, you do something for once, you do it once. You do it for a week, whatever. You do it for a couple months, it's a routine. But you do it for 30 years, it's like a ritual,
Hmm.
And so I think you almost become entranced by it. And so I'm like, I think the routine is a really good one. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence someone like that is also deeply spiritual or religious. Like, I'm not saying you have to believe in God. I have trouble getting there myself, but just like, oh, it's his sort of vulnerability and his almost willingness to submit to something larger than
Hmm.
himself that's probably the key to a lot of that humility and that stillness. It's got to be a part of it. It
Hmm.
can't be an accident.
Yeah, I think you're right. I found a lot of people, myself included, have trouble staying or getting grounded, especially when we're all wrapped up in our work. And one thing that's been good for me is taking lessons in something that you're not good at,
Sure.
because there's nothing quite like getting a voice coach or something for a professional. But even outside of that, like getting a Chinese teacher, you can, because in the workplace we kind of have to sell ourselves all the time.
Right.
It's hard to go, oh gee, I'm just not really that good at this, or I'm working on this and this, because you have to sell yourself as like the best man for the job. And so getting a teacher in something that you're not necessarily good at has actually been quite good for that. It sort of gets you in, and I'm not even talking about like this general student of life mindset. I mean like looking at a actual skill that you suck at and hiring someone to tell you how to do it right.
Well, I talk about this a lot in the book. Like, the power of a hobby is
Yeah.
that embodied, right? Like, Winston Churchill, after the First World War, he's like in the worst sort of spot in his career, and his sister-in-law gives him this children's paint set, and she goes, my kids seem to have fun, why don't you try having fun? And he falls in love with painting, and he paints something like 500 paintings in his lifetime, and he's not good. Like the paintings don't belong in museums
Yeah.
because they're good. They belong in museums because of what the person who painted them was able to do through painting. Do you get what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, he was like defeating Hitler, and he's like, here's a crappy landscape. It's like,
Yes.
well, you also were defeating Hitler at the same time.
But like, it's not like they're related. It's not like he's into BDSM and it's a secret. It's like the process of painting.
It's a weird visual.
Yeah. The process of painting and the relaxation that comes from it and the joy that comes from it and the presence that comes from it was what allowed him to manage the terrible stress that was the insane burden that he was under.
That's true, I think. And also, to your previous work, I think getting feedback and criticism
Sure.
in an area that you don't have maybe a ton of ego attached to
Yes.
helps you go, oh, maybe I should consider doing that in this other area that is my whole life, or that I have
Yeah.
importance
Well,
attached to.
and deciding that results are not the primary motivation for doing it. So like,
Yeah.
I've run and swam for a long time now, and people are like, oh, are you training for a marathon? Or like, why don't you train for a marathon? And it's
Mhm.
like, I'm not trying to get better at my hobbies. Like, like, I'm not trying to win.
Win.
I am trying to
yeah.
get better at them. I'm not trying to win my hobbies, and I don't need any more competition in my life. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to, I'm, the win is that I made the time for it.
That's a good point. I think for me, with languages, for example, it's really clear because I can go to any bubble tea shop, and there'll be a 7 or 8 year old or 10-year-old whatever kid in there,
Yeah.
and they're speaking more fluently than me. They've got a fourth grade reading book, and they're reading it, and I need a dictionary to read that same
Yeah,
book.
sure.
And it's really hard to be like, I'm the best at this. It's like, nope, this child who can't even tie his shoes is actually better than you at this, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how often do you get that as you become better and better at what you do?
Yeah,
Like,
it's rare.
there's fewer people who are like, Jordan, you're doing a horrible job.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you need to like get serious about this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I actually just emailed Mark Marin the other day, and he replied today and was like, I can't help you because I was like, hey, I'll pay you for some like consulting on interviewing. And he was like, I can't articulate what I'm doing. I can't be of any help to you at all. It's not that I don't want to do it. I just can't do it.
So that's interesting. You reached out to him as not as a peer?
I was just like, hey, would you consider going through like your prep process, your interview process? Because I obviously would pay you for that. Because otherwise, he's just like, ugh, everyone's gonna ask me to
Right.
do this.
Sure, sure.
And I've done that with a few journalists and stuff, and a lot of them are like, yeah, let's do it. Come to New York and we'll do it. Mark Maron was just like, I can't actually help you. I know this already.
Oh, interesting.
Thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I reach out to people like that all the time to try to get. It is hard to find somebody who's going to be at a higher level that's also willing to like sit down with you and help you do it.
But I also think, I was thinking about this for something we're doing for Daily Stoic right now. I've been amazed. So my books have sort of made their way through professional sports.
Yeah.
The amount of coaches who are like best in the world at what they do that like send me emails having read the books is like blowing my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not it's not a reflection of me, it's a reflection of them, right? So they're like, so most people don't read, right? Most people think they're good at what they do and they're good enough. Then there's a certain percentage of people that read. And then that's great. That's like self-improvement. But like what percentage of people are like, I wonder if there's anything more I can learn from this person.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And like, I've been very impressed and inspired by the culture in sports of like, oh, this person's the best in the world at this thing that's vaguely related to what I do. I'm going to see if I can learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, so sports in a way that a lot of business doesn't has a culture of like, hey, let's bring in speakers. And like when I spoke at the University of Alabama maybe 3 years ago, Nick Saban sat in the front row and asked the first question after the talk, right? And like I don't think that was a reflection of like how riveting my talk was. I think it was a reflection of one, he's trying to model to his players like the idea of being a perpetual student. And then maybe there's a 1% chance that I'll actually have an interesting thing to say and like maybe he will learn something from the question. But the point is like he's not thinking, I'm Nick Saban. I'm the greatest coach in the history of collegiate athletics. Mm-hmm. What could you possibly show me? It's the exact opposite.
Yeah, that's interesting. And plus, I would imagine he found it through some other coach that maybe at some level competes with him or could have.
Yeah, maybe.
Because you've obviously talked with a lot of NFL teams and things like that. They're sharing it with each other, right? So these coaches aren't like, ooh, I'm not going to share this Ryan Holiday book. That's my little secret. It's everywhere.
No, and that's why I was asking about Maron. Like I would, and sometimes it's weird, people have trouble identifying, but I would think that you, given what you've accomplished, would be able to just say like, hey, Mark, do you have any advice?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's also cool that you offer to pay.
Yeah, I always do because otherwise I feel like the problem is a lot of people have responded, oh, I wouldn't take your money. I would love to do this for you. The problem is I'm so busy for the next like 7 months. And I'm like, well, I bet you're busy doing things that pay you. So if I add money to the equation, maybe it speeds the timeline up 6 months.
That's true.
You know? True. Yeah. There is, and also if you pay, you get a lot more than just like a 2-line email of advice. Generally,
no, that's true. I just hired. Do you know John Beer?
Yeah. He emailed me about doing this.
Yeah. I worked with him on the thing, and it was like it's like you have friends who are really great at stuff, but you're like, and you're like, no, I want to pay you because you are the best in the world at what you do. Mm-hmm. Like he is. Was it Jack Taylor? He is like a great publicity firm, right? And like it was like. I'm not going to ask you a favor as a friend. I want like the full thing.
The full treatment, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a weird thing. I think earlier in my career, I would have been like, oh, I got to get a deal. You know, it's like, no, actually, like expertise is expensive.
It is. Yeah, I'm the same way. I like to pay knowing that I'm going to get the full treatment. Yeah, if somebody says, look, I'll do this for free because I only have 30 minutes of stuff for you, then fine. Yeah. But I don't want an 8-week training program for free because it's going to just build resentment if it even exists.
What I figured out with my marketing business, because so few people actually were in a position either to, a lot of people wanted to pay for the full treatment. A lot of people actually were not a good fit for the full treatment. So I was like, here's what we'll do. You can buy an hour of my time and I'll tell you everything I think you should know and everything I think you should do. And then if it does make sense for us to work together, that'll just apply to the fee. But like, I actually, we were talking about lawyers. I like the lawyer model, right? Of like, this is what an hour of legal advice costs.
Yeah, 6 minutes.
It doesn't have to be the like, oh, let's go through this big pitch dance and come up with this thing. And then like I think we should be, in a way, we should be a little bit more transactional towards expertise and go like, this is what 30 minutes of Jordan's time costs about starting a podcast. Buy it or don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm happy to talk people out of doing it. That part's free if you're at an event where I'm giving a talk. I'll talk you out of doing a podcast if you.
Please. Yeah.
That's because
you've talked me out of it.
Oh, did I?
Well, yeah. We've talked about this, but yeah.
Yeah. Back in at MMT or something. Yeah. That's what I'm referring to. I go to these events and they're like, talk about podcasting. I'm like, let me save all of you a lot of time.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
I do the same thing. You should not write a book.
Yeah. We talk about this sometimes in text where I'm like, here's a book. What could this possibly be about? And it's like, it should never have been written. Yeah. This is one of those books where they wanted a book so that they could say, I have a book.
People want the results of having a book. Yeah. And I think they want the results of having a podcast, but they don't actually want a thing.
That's true. Yeah.
And I think about that like I have a podcast that's on my terms that I like. So for Daily Stoic, I just read the email every day. So it's like a 2-minute podcast.
Yeah.
It not only doesn't take my eye off the ball of what I like doing, which is writing, but it complements the writing.
Sure.
Like it's just bringing the writing to people who don't like to read. You know?
That's a good point.
And so it's been wonderful. And like there might be some, like maybe there's 50 people that I want to interview at some point, and maybe I'll do that. But it's like, what I don't want to do is be interviewing 5 people a week because it's not what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, it'll keep you up at night, though. I'll tell you that.
So that's actually a great contrast.
Yeah.
People not only do they not do things that get them out of bed in the morning, but they do things that keep them up at night.
Yeah, there's something clever in there, right?
Yes, there is.
A clever way of phrasing it.
Maybe that should be your book.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, I'll work. It's kind of a long title. All right. In closing, I'm wondering what keeps you driving so hard at your goals. But I know it sounds like a stupid question. But on the one hand, there's a lot in Stillness Is the Key about how success is ephemeral. Our goals are not really that meaningful, or at least not as we previously thought. Then you look at your kids and you're like, wow, nothing I do matters except for raising this kid.
Sure. But then you still show up for work every day.
Yeah, and like you're doing a crazy long book tour to try to get this thing going and get it into people's hands. So I guess what I'm asking about is like, what daddy issues do you have that are all coalescing in this book tour?
I got a lot of them. I do feel like a lot of very successful men, maybe it's women too, but I only know about the male experience, but it's like, Daddy, can you please be proud of me now?
Yeah, finally.
It's not going to happen. Like, if you have to say that, it's not going to happen. Even if you're, like, there are people whose parents, who become president, and then their parents are like, but you weren't as good as FDR, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, so I got a little bit of that. But I think there is this fear. People think, if I'm content, if I have some idea of enough, I won't make good work anymore.
Yeah, I'll lose my edge.
Yeah.
Same with humility. Ego is the enemy had something like this. Like and I'm totally guilty of this. We think if we're humble, we're totally screwed because then your edge is gone.
I would dispute whether the hunger is the edge. You know what I mean? Like, I think, like, so I do have some issue that makes me not want to rest between books. Like, always have one. There's a part of me that always wants them to be bigger. The risk of oversharing, I'm in the middle of negotiating this deal for the next book, and I saw my dad, and I was like, Dad, like, isn't this a very large number? Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, you shouldn't think about it today, or something like this. And then later he was like, how much do you think this house cost? Like, he wanted to talk about anything but that thing.
Yeah.
And there's a part of that, right? Like, there's clearly a part of that drives me a little bit, but I don't want to be driven by it.
No.
And I don't, so maybe that's what created 9 books in 7 years as opposed to 4 books in 7 years or whatever. But the actual books themselves, that's not an edge. That's the opposite of an edge. The craving or the need is not making them better. If anything, it makes them worse because you're trying to rush through them.
Sure.
So, like, really you want to be coming at it from a place of, like, I actually, like, really have something I want to say. Like, I really love this. Like, I would, and this goes to the Robert Greene thing, I would do this for free. Like, even if I wasn't getting paid, would you do it for free? So I think I do talk about how, you have to have some idea of enough, and that, like, success is ephemeral and no amount of external accomplishment is going to fill a hole in your soul. But I don't think that's the same thing as genuinely loving the process or the craft of the thing. Like, I feel like if someone handed me $1 billion tomorrow, all that would do would make my books. It would make my books better.
You'd have a nicer desk.
I'd have a nicer desk,
That's
but
it.
I'd also probably even be writing from a slightly purer place. You know, I'd still
For sure.
be,
Oh, yeah.
I'd still be writing. I'd be able to dictate terms slightly better. I could think longer term. So like, to me, that's a sign you're in the right thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think about that all the time, too. If I had $1 billion, I'd be like, oh, cool. I'll just build my own studio and I'll fly everyone in first class. But
Yeah.
otherwise, we're still sitting in chairs, like shifting around after an hour.
Casey Neistat said that to me one time. He was like, you make money, you don't do the work to make money, you make money to do more work.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a version of that that's unhealthy, right? Like, I got more and more and more, but there's also, it's like, no, I actually, like, this is the most satisfying thing. And the success is about encouraging and facilitating the chase of that meaningful experience, rather than like the experience is a means to the end of having the stuff. But it does, I mean, like, you have kids or you zoom out a little bit, it does help you to go like there would have been a time where, like, if somebody ran in the room and was like, you got to stop, like, your son wants to go swimming, I'd be like, I have to finish this.
Right.
And now I go, I don't. Like, there's other things that are important. And if you told me I could trade a certain amount of books for having a really great family, I would take that trade in 2 seconds, because the thing, it's not the output of the books that's important to me. It's that I just get to keep doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's hard, but it's hard if you don't. I think it's hard for people who haven't done anything that they feel successful having done.
Sure.
Or maybe it's actually harder when you do have success. I'm not sure now.
Yeah, look, a lot of this is like, these weren't things I was wrestling with when I was 20. I was wrestling with, like, how do I get my shot?
Yeah.
You know, and how do I not blow said shot?
Not be broke, yeah.
Right. But it eventually becomes an issue. Like, and you know, writing it can be a great profession. It's not one of those things where, like, I don't have to work anymore. Like, I do have to, like, I have to pay bills, right?
Sure.
Like, and like, my roof isn't free. So if I'm going to do something, I want it to be something that I like. I think it's also important that you make life decisions that don't force career decisions.
Ooh, that's good.
You know, like,
Yeah.
people decide to live in New York City, or they decide that they have to have 2 Teslas, or, you know, that they have to fly first class everywhere or whatever. And then that makes it hard for them to make really good career.
Yeah, you got the golden handcuffs. You
Yes.
go to the big law firm, you buy the house in Nantucket because you're miserable in the city, and then you get a boat, and then you're like, well, I can't quit.
There's a
my bills are huge.
reason that corporate firms will sometimes co-sign on mortgages for you. You know?
Jeez, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because, like, they want,
That's evil.
you know,
Evil genius.
or sometimes, like, sometimes CEOs, companies will loan them money, you know, because that's, so Upton Sinclair has this thing called the dress suit bribe. And it was always really important, really powerful to me to think about. She's like, so you think, like, oh, I paid, this is obviously from the early 1900s, like, you paid a quarter to have your shoes shined. But how much are you paid to have to shine your shoes, to have shiny shoes, right? And so he's like, you think they're taking you out to a fancy lunch, but really they're teaching you that this is what, like, they're giving you a new baseline of what lunch is, right? And then this becomes this thing, and then you can't get out of it. Like, I was very lucky on my first Stoicism book. Like, I was paid fairly based on what people thought I could do, but I wasn't like, I didn't need, I could go, like, I could think long term with the book because financially I'd make good decisions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And so that's another reason people are like, I'm quitting my job to start a podcast. It's like, really bad idea.
Terrible.
Like,
one of the worst. If the only thing worse than trying to make that podcast money is trying to get rich selling books.
Yes.
It's like
yes.
those are like the two
There's actually
worst.
much better money in podcasts right now than there
which
are
is
in books.
not saying a whole lot.
Right. But like, it's like, no, love that, like, you have your job, love your thing, build a parallel track that eventually you can jump onto. If you like, just, it's like quitting your job to be a blogger. The kind of blogging you have to do to keep from starving is not conducive to the kind of reps you need to get great.
That's a good point. I think that's really good. It's about the quality of the reps and not just making sure that you've screwed yourself over so that you have to do it full time.
Yes.
14 hours a day blogging.
Yeah, people think there's something glamorous or, sincere about like blowing up your life.
The whole going all in thing. Oh, that's a whole different show.
Yeah.
Follow your passion, go all in. Tell your parents to go screw themselves if they won't let you become an entrepreneur. All terrible advice.
Yes.
But probably advice for another time.
All right.
Thank you very. Oh, by the way, who chooses the form factor for these books? Like, this
What do you
is
mean?
small. Who chooses like, oh, I want it to be a miniature version of a book, a snack size.
So
book.
Obstacle is the Way. They were like, hey, what about this size? And I held it and I liked it. And I was like, that's great. And then what we realized, there's just something really powerful about a smaller book that you could read in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why like people, you do it, suddenly you do a 30-minute show and your downloads spike and you're like, oh, like that's how I should do it. And so it was just it's a random chance thing, but there's a very distinct reason now that the 3 books are the same size, the same length, the same format.
They're going to look good in a box set.
A box set's coming next year.
I figured as much. That's
Yeah.
good. That's your best of right there.
Yeah, it is.
All right, stillness is the key. I almost said the way.
I'll take
I'm
it.
sure that's happened
Also
before.
true.
Yeah, stillness is the key. Well, it's easier to find if you get the title right. It's much easier to find if you get the title right. Ryan, thank you very much, man.
Thanks again.